Okay, 25, 24, 23, 22, 21, 20. Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And all those people watching us from around the world saying, we know where Canada is, we know where British Columbia is, where is Prince George? Well, today is your day because we are in Prince George, and Prince George is about 500 miles north of Vancouver, or for our friends in Europe, about 800 kilometers. It is an amazing place of nature, 100 lakes all around us, nature. And if you ever, which you must, go to Canada, come to British Columbia, and then in particular, come to Prince George in northern British Columbia. Today, a very special day. We have a very, very special guest, and he is the Dean of the University of Northern British Columbia. And I've been in Prince George for about 60 years. I'm very proud of our university and our colleges that we have here. And his name is Dr. Ronald Camp. He's the Faculty of Business and Economics Dean. He is also has a BA in psychology from the Whitworth College, and he'll talk about that more. A master's in management at Wilmette University, and a PhD in commerce and business administration from the University of British Columbia. Mm-hmm. Ronald, welcome to my show.
Thank you.
So tell us a bit about yourself. Are you from British Columbia? Or where are you? How did you? And the other part that you also did is I didn't mention that, but before you came here, you were in Regina,
right, and
some other places. Maybe just give us a bit of a background of you.
A bit of a background. I'm actually originally from Spokane, Washington.
Okay.
In the U.S.
Yeah.
My mom and her parents, her little brother, moved to Washington from Nelson, B.C. back in the 50s.
Oh my goodness. Can you believe that?
So I've kicked around a bit. I've been some other places, you said. I've worked in Japan, Germany, Finland, the US, and Canada. I've done, speaking engagements in a lot of countries because of the academic job.
Right.
I was at University of Regina for about 18 years. Most recently, I was a director with the Canadian Institute of Public Safety Research and Treatment, which is it's an organization, a research organization that's working on addressing mental health issues for public safety personnel.
Right.
Which was nice for me because it kind of brought the psychology for my bachelor's degree together with the PhD in leadership. And so how do you
It's
take
quite a
these
package
things?
if you look at your background, psychology, and then then obviously business and commerce, and then safety and all of those things together. So were you born in the United States?
I was.
In Spokane?
In Spokane.
Beautiful area.
It is.
Really, so that's where you got your initial education?
It is.
And then from there on in, so when did you come to Canada? Did you go to Regina first?
Actually, I went to Vancouver first.
Okay, to UBC.
To UBC.
Yeah.
So
to get the
PhD.
PhD.
Right.
Yeah.
So went to UBC for a PhD, wanted to do more with international business and organizational management. Did my research in cross-cultural management.
Right.
And
what is that?
So you're looking at how the country and the culture you come from affects the way people work together, what motivates them, how do your values and beliefs drive some of the things you do, and as a leader, what do you do with that to better motivate people to enhance the productivity, the performance outcomes of organizations?
Right. Interesting. So you went to UBC, you got your PhD in business and economics. Then where did you go from there?
Then I went to the University of Regina. I was an associate professor in organizational behavior and the associate dean of the Falyn Graduate School of Business.
So, and my son-in-law lives in Regina, lived in, his name is Ian Argu.
Okay.
Yeah, so he must have gone to university there as well, I believe.
Was he in the business faculty?
Pardon me?
Was he in the business faculty, or?
I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
So but yeah, it was kind of interesting when I saw that. So you went there, and then where did you go from there? So now the other part the other part, because you got so many things going on, so I'm trying to figure out. So then you were in Regina, and then what I noticed is Finland in there.
Right.
I thought that was very interesting.
Oh, I love Finland.
Yeah.
I spent about 10
All
years.
the Scandinavian countries, right? Are beautiful.
I'm Norwegian by heritage, so of course they're all beautiful.
I'm Dutch. Was Dutch.
Was Dutch.
Yeah, was born in Holland.
Yeah, one of the sad things is my part of the family lost the Norwegian language. When my grandmother was 6, her mom said, look, you're living in an English-speaking country. We have to fit in. You have to speak English.
Right.
So the family gave up on that. And when I was meeting cousins on that family farm in Norway a few years ago, my great-grandmother's younger sister is still alive, and I couldn't talk to her because she can't speak English and I can't speak Norwegian.
Right.
So I was trying to talk through cousins. And it's a shame I think a lot of the migrant experience coming to Canada is giving up the culture and the language that you came with that add value.
Yeah, so for myself, I grew up speaking Dutch, and then a dialect, actually. I was born in northeastern Holland. Spoke dialect first, which is somewhat different than High Dutch. Actually, people that speak High Dutch couldn't even understand what I was saying if I spoke dialect. But but then when I came to Canada, is that I came alone, so I didn't connect directly to the Dutch community.
Right.
So I started speaking English right away, and so that's I can still speak dialect in Dutch. My daughters actually like thinking of Holland and still try to speak Dutch somewhat and some other languages. So what did you do then in Finland?
I went over on a sabbatical. I taught business and leadership classes primarily. Tried to do a little bit of research, but I was doing some things with leadership different from the way they were teaching it in Finland, and so they kept hiring me to come back and teach leadership classes.
Right.
Which then led to a longer relationship. So I'm a fellow of the Turku University of Applied Sciences for leadership.
So when did you come to the University of Northern British Columbia?
I came January 1st, 2021.
January. So that's about 3 years ago? Or?
Yeah, 3 years, 3 years, 4 months, 20 some days.
Yeah. So you came to Prince George from
Regina.
From Regina, and so so then you became the dean of the business and economics.
I came to set up the Faculty of Business and Economics. So
you were the founding.
I am the founding dean of the faculty.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, the other people that are just kind of watching us here and saying, well, what are these things all about? What have you got here? I have one of them, too.
So my staff came up with this brilliant idea that we needed lapel pins to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the MBA program at UNBC. So while the faculties knew that we've had an established business school since the start of the university 40 years ago, but 20 years ago they started an MBA program. Which is important for a number of reasons, one of which is that, as you're aware, doing business in a setting like this isn't the same as being in a major metropolitan center.
Oh, yeah.
And so having the MBA program here allows us to take that core international globalized MBA curriculum, but situate it in a context where people are really working, where the constraints are different, where the need to engage in innovation or bricolage, because we catch together whatever we can here and make it work, right? You have to be innovative. You got to do things differently.
Right.
And so the desire was to create a program that would kickstart that with students, rather than having them go down to Vancouver or whatever to do something in a traditional MBA setting.
Yeah, and then again, for the people watching us from around the world, which again is very, very important, because so much of the business we are doing in Canada, in particular British Columbia, is extracting minerals or that go elsewhere, usually for further manufacturing. We got resources, not only wood as we have, but also a variety of different resources that require international markets in a lot of cases.
They do, but one of the challenges, which I know you're familiar with, is taking those resources and doing value-added activities. So it's not just initial extraction or initial processing, but it's the value-added manufacturing. So, and right over the corner here, we've got Whittick, where they're doing world-class research on mass timber construction.
Yeah.
So we can take the beautiful forests we see and use them in a way we can regenerate the forest, we can reduce carbon emissions that are associated with concrete and other standard big manufacturing processes. But we can add value right here, protect the environment, protect the economy, grow the economy, and lead to a more sustainable, high quality of life in this region, with people like yourself leading the way in these value-adding activities.
Yeah, and so the key there again is that entrepreneurship, looking for investments, then it becomes developing new products for new markets, working closely with University of Northern British Columbia in this case, and the College of New Caledonia.
Right.
So those are again very, very important relationships that we must have. Right.
And we need the leaders of these organizations to understand the finance, the strategy, the big picture issues. So when you have the graduates from, say, New Caledonia that are coming out and saying, I think I've got a new way to do this, they can situate that in the bigger business picture and say, how do we plug into a global market and find investors and buyers for these things that will drive our communities forward in a way that's not possible just cutting down trees and shipping them to Asia.
Exactly. Now the other part is that I came here in 1965 from Holland. And, with the idea of, my dream was to build a lumber mill. Started with nothing, couldn't speak the language, didn't know soul, didn't have a job. And I had $25.47 actually when I came off the bus. But I had very positive attitude, passion. I give it everything once I decide to go a direction. And then work ethic is working hard. So it's the land of opportunity. That's how I always looked at that. And Canada, by and large, is an immigrants country. The makeup or the mosaic of Canada is people from all over the world getting together and building a country. And I believe collectively we've done well. But it's also a country of opportunity, and particularly in places like British Columbia, and in particular Northern British Columbia. When I came here in 1965, right here, the standard question would be is, when did you come here and when are you leaving? There's a place to make money and not to stay. And I was fortunate enough to see it go from being a boomtown to becoming something totally the opposite of being just a perfect place to have a family. But then add to that is that infrastructure in terms of the underlying infrastructure that is required, maybe swimming pools and schooling, and then colleges, universities. That I was very involved in the College of New Caledonia, but also very involved in getting the University of Northern British Columbia. And it was quite a battle for us, the North, bringing together the push behind the politicians who are in Victoria, and there's lots of pressure on the capital there to get this freestanding university, and I believe it was 1990 that it started, that nearly 35 years ago. And, and now today it is already a number of years together that it is the most successful small university in Canada.
And by some measures it is.
Yeah. And has evolved gradually. The medical school, obviously 20 years ago, exactly this year, the MBA program, and it has become part of our structure.
It is, and it's still evolving and growing. So bringing up the medical program, one of the things we've done recently with the MBA program is take 3 courses and kind of repurpose those a little bit to be a standalone certificate in leadership.
Right.
So you've got somebody coming through the medical school, they go off to Northern Health to get a job. Now they're supervising a ward or they're taking on a bigger part of the health region. What do they do with leadership?
Right.
Well, we've got ways now that we can integrate some of the MBA training with the medical training.
Right.
So we've got better rounded people running the systems up here.
Right. Does that involve micro certification in all of those kind of directions, or is that different?
It depends on how you define it.
Yeah.
Some micro certification, it's non-credit. All it says is you attended so many hours of adult education.
Right.
With our certificate programs within the degree programs, this is actually 3 graduate courses.
Right.
So it'd be 9 credit hours worth of study. We're doing all the work you would be doing for that class within an MBA.
Right.
It's just you don't have to take the additional 15 courses to complete the degree. Although, if you want to, you've done 3, you complete the 3, you take your credits, you apply them to the MBA. You've got an easier ride of it as you go into the full-time work that other people are doing.
Right, right.
So it's meant to be an easier way to get in. It's meant to be a little bit less of a intensive way to get in, so it's a lower barrier to entry for some people that quite honestly are good enough to do an MBA, but they're afraid of it.
Right.
And you get in, you take 3 classes, you're successful, you go, well, wait, I could do the rest of that.
So why is that they would be, so I remember when the MBA classes started, I was invited several times to, do presentations, to the group, and I thought it was a great idea. In our company, we have a couple of people that took the MBA classes, and it's obviously been a major asset not only to them but also to us as a company. So the other part, the economics of it, that relatively speaking, as we look around opportunities for people, where do you get an MBA degree and the cost of it, it is probably more cost efficient in northern BC than it would be at UBC or Toronto or other places.
Very much so.
And the quality may be equal or in a lot of cases better in my view, because it's not as many people involved, and that would be my view of it, so.
The Canadian education market's a little different than most countries.
Right.
So if you look in the United States, we think of Harvard and Stanford. You've got these incredibly good universities, and then you hear horror stories about small regional or private schools that students ripped off.
Right.
Canada doesn't have that.
No.
Canada's got a very level playing field, and there's really not a lot of quality difference between the U of T or UBC or UNBC or Regina or Saskatoon or Dalhousie, whatever.
Right.
It's all moderately excellent universities.
Right.
So the reality is anything you get here would be comparable to anything you get anywhere in Canada, pretty much, with an MBA.
Right.
We don't do some specializations, and like I said, we focus more on what the MBA was traditionally, which was a credential for general managers, directors, and executives. I need this broad strategic view of everything.
Right.
If you go to Simon Fraser, you can do an MBA in technology, or you can do other really specialized programs that fit in a big market like Vancouver.
Right.
We don't have a lot of scope for people to go into those things, so we don't try to do that here.
Right, right.
So from a general standpoint, it's better than, or as good as anything you're going to get down there. But if you're really trying to understand working in its resource-constrained environment, if you're really trying to understand sustainability issues as they integrate into business, we're doing more than anybody else in Canada in that right now.
Right.
So in terms of business schools and sustainability and education, nobody's ranking on it yet, but talking to other deans across the country, we're setting the stage for what's going to come in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, you're going to get more here than you could anywhere else right now.
Yeah, so that makes you kind of unique and being ahead of where we are going, really.
Right. Unfortunately, if I compare myself and our programs to France, French legislation for sustainability education in the business schools is way ahead of us, and we've got some catching up to do. But we're setting our targets on globally. We want to be excellent, not just the best little school in Canada.
No.
We want to be one of the top universities in the world.
So if I look at the university, same as the college actually, but if you look at the University of Northern British Columbia, there's a lot of people from other countries.
Yes.
And what makes us attractive? Is it Canada or is it the university? What is it about us why they like to come here?
Well, I think it's a combination of both those. Canada is an attractive place to be.
Right, I know that.
Prince George is a less expensive place to be, obviously, than Vancouver or Toronto. We do have an excellent university here. If what you want to do is a combination of research and teaching, there are not a lot of better places in Canada to be. We have people who are publishing in the top journals in the world. We're in major networks like CIPSERT. You don't have to go to UBC to get part of that.
Right.
You can do it in a place like this.
Right.
So there are reasons why this is attractive to a lot of people from a lot of places.
Right. So most of the people that we attract are from Asia or from all over the world?
It's all over.
Yeah.
Within my faculty, we've got professors like myself from the U.S., a couple from Asia. We've got faculty members from the Middle East, from Africa, from Europe.
Yeah.
It's United Nations right here in Prince George.
Yeah. Now the other part, Ron, that that has always been, and all the time that I've been involved, is the College of New Caledonia, University of Northern British Columbia. They're working together quite closely, and obviously the other part that we have here, First Nation, is kind of evolving now and becoming much more proactive and looking at resources and developing skill sets, entrepreneurship, all of that sort of thing is happening, and the college and university are quite proactive in that.
I would say so, yes. Had a meeting earlier today with my advisory board. I've got a couple of people on the board from Kitsim-Kalem. I've got a couple of people on the board from Clayton-Tenay. We're looking at economic development issues with them and how we can incorporate what they're learning into what we're teaching. We're looking at developing business cases for training to be published through the Ivy School of Business, so a global stage for that. Like you said, there's been this historic European focus on business, but we're getting better, and with involvement with First Nations Major Project Coalition, Nation to Nation here, the BC Natural Resources Forum, the university, the local business communities, provincial communities, national are coming together to say, what do we do to help with economic and community development with Indigenous communities? How do we really lean into UN DRIP or the Truth and Reconciliation Act to say, we need to make equal partners with people that have been pushed to the margins in their own lands, which is atrocious.
Yeah.
But I think we're starting to do it in a way that it's going to make sense for them, it's going to make sense for the university, it's going to make sense for businesses, so we all benefit from this.
Yeah. When I first came here in 1965, in 1967, I didn't have nothing when I came, starting from the ground up and looking to build a mill. So I became involved in a sawmill in the Yukon Territory in Watson Lake. Watson Lake is just across the border from BC. You likely know that. And, coming from Holland, and the coldest I've seen there was 62 below. And then the other part about it is then it snows in July.
62 below, that's Fahrenheit or Celsius?
It's about the same, right? I'm not sure.
40 is the same.
Yeah, so it must then be colder. Even I don't know that, but
I was on the call with my brother one day.
it's very cold.
It was very cold. My brother asked me what the temperature was. It was in Regina. I said it's minus 56 Celsius.
Yeah. So what is it?
He goes, oh, he says, that's with the wind chill, right? I said, you're right, that's with the wind chill. He said, okay, so what is it without the wind chill? I said, it's minus 52. There was this very long pause. And then he goes, what's that in Fahrenheit? And I said, it's minus 69. There was a very longer pause. He says, okay, you win.
Yeah, interesting. The other part that I say about it, it snows in July and you don't know if it is late or early. So that's another thing. But a very good place to learn to ski, because water ski is because Watson Lake is so cold that you don't want to fall off. You hold like this. But so I was, managing a small lumber mill and part ownership. 90% of our employees were First Nations.
Okay.
And we had to kind of train them from the ground up. But, it was a challenge to run an operation in that location. But that was my first experience in manufacturing and working with First Nations in particular. To me, that was very new. I read about it in books, but not being there.
Right.
So it was quite an experience. Here now, that First Nations have not been as involved as I always thought they could be and should be. And, but that's starting to change now.
It is.
And so people in industry like myself, I'm a manufacturer, value-added manufacturer, we know that access to the fiber is changing, and so that the more control First Nations is getting of the fiber. So in fact, what we now have is that the timber in British Columbia is BC government's timber. That means the people of British Columbia, but now a portion thereof will be in First Nations hands. Right now about 15%, likely going as high as 20, if not more. And then it becomes the question: okay, so now what? Now you have the timber. What do you do now? And so people like me that I have value-added manufacturing facilities here in northern British Columbia, have been here for 50 years. We're looking towards First Nations and saying, what can we do together that works for you meaning the band or the nation, and us, like here. Obviously, we're in the territory of Clayton and Tenay is one, but then again, we're also further north and further west and working closely with First Nations there. Our objective has usually been in our companies to have, employees in our operations, one third male, one third female, one third mixed minorities, and substantially First Nations. And so we do that here, Vanderhoof, and in Houston, BC. But then looking forward, we're going beyond that and saying, where do we get the training? How do we get more of the training? And I've been very proactive in talking about a center of excellence. I call it a center of excellence, because I don't want to give it another name, because what does it mean? It means to me is, I do a fair amount of presenting on different issues, business in particular, in this particular case, where I was making a presentation at BCIT. So I go to BCIT, amazing facility, probably 40,000 students. I arrived there to do a presentation, and there's so many buildings, I don't even know where to go. So anyway, so I did the presentation. It's all very good, but for the last 4 or 5 years, and in fact, I committed $1 million towards developing a center of excellence that is not a copy of BCIT, but a facility where we can create the skill sets that we require. In the 50 years that I've been in business here, my major problem has always been not banking, not but not access to markets or entrepreneurship. It has been access to a skilled workforce. That was already that way when I started in 1975. Still the same today.
Right.
And I find that right through from management levels all the way to millwrights and other skill sets, even the most basic skill sets. I've been very involved with the College of New Caledonia, as you likely know. My name is under the John A. Brink Trades and Technology Center. But that is one step in the direction, but we have to go much further. And what I believe is that recently, in the last year or so, I think industry supported, I believe, a $250 million investment in BCIT to put up another structure. I say, I love BCIT and all those kind of things. We should start investing capital for that particular purpose here in northern British Columbia. I've worked with, UNBC with Jeff Payne and his people, and the same with Cindy and the College of New Caledonia. I say working together to get that center of excellence is critical, because at the time that I was involved with the College of New Caledonia and the Trades and Technology Center, and that was probably 25, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, something like that. And already then there was a problem. The problem was not, we have huge resources here, huge opportunity here. We have access to market, we have roads, railroads, air, rail, all of those things, sea, location strategically to the North American or the US market, China on the next side, or Asia, and Europe on the other side. So we have fabulous location, amazing resources, underlying things that we need like power, hydro, and all of those things we have relatively cheap by global market comparison. So we have all of that. We can attract capital. We can attract entrepreneurship. The deterrent will be, I said when I spoke to the donation that I made to the college, but will be the deterrent factor is access to a skilled workforce. That still is the case today. So I say to people in a general sense, including First Nations, obviously, but everybody, is that how do we attract capital to build, from governments in particular, to build a center of excellence to focus on the skill sets. Because at the end of the day, I cannot be successful globally in a global market unless we find, and if we're competing with the skill sets that other competing, because talking forests now, but it applies to all other resources as well, is that Europe, Scandinavian in particular, but also Holland and all the countries there, are very good at developing skill sets, and so does Venezuela, Brazil, a lot of other things. We have not done as well as we can, and I believe it's one of the things, in particular now, with First Nations becoming more involved, it puts even more of a focus on where do we find the skill sets if we want to add more social and economic value to our resources.
Right. And obviously education is critical to that.
Yeah, critical.
I think part of that, well, historically there are problems. When I was talking about a 3-course certificate program to get people past being afraid of applying to programs, I think with a lot of people in northern BC, they're first-generation students for college or university. They don't have that in the family. They're not looking back to, my grandfather was an MD and my grandmother was a university librarian, and of course everybody in the family is following on in university. We look at Europe and they've got universities where the same family's been going for 300 or 400 years. It's just what you do.
Yeah.
I think part of it is changing a culture and making it so that people see that it is accessible. It's not something for other people in other places.
Right.
I think it's helping people to understand the value add of additional education goes to the value add in your own career.
Right.
And it's not that you did business versus basket weaving, but if you get a university education, you learn about critical thinking and you become more flexible in your mindset and you're better able to think broadly and encompass multiple things like, well, wait a minute, we've got options here, we've got options over there. I'm not stuck with this thing. We could do this differently, right?
Right.
I can take my $24.97 and
Right.
go to Watson Lake and start building an empire.
Right.
And it's a reasonable thing to think I can do
Right.
because I've got an educational experience background. So you were a manager in Holland before coming to Canada, correct?
Academically, I was not a success story.
No, but you had that higher level work experience.
I'm tongue-in-cheek a little bit, so I just wanted to give you that. So I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. So, then I started working. So they said, what are we going to do with this guy? They failed grade 7 3 times. So some people said, well, maybe send him to the mentally challenged school. My parents said, no, they were beautiful people. No, they're not going to do that. So maybe we'll get him, train him in working, getting a career in working with his hands, right? So I loved lumber. My dad worked in a lumber, and my grandfather was a master carpenter. So at 13, I started working in the furniture factory, and I loved it. And then, we were the other part where Canada comes into the picture is that I was born in 1940. I'm going to be 84 this year in November. Is that I remember the war years well. Mm-hmm. I was there, and we were liberated by the Canadians April the 12th, 1945. And it made such an impression on me that I always knew I would go to Canada. And there was no question in my, to the land of my heroes. Mm-hmm. And so I tried to go when I was 17, and then got drafted into the Dutch Air Force for 2 years. Good experience, and special forces. Actually, I don't know why, but I wanted to be a pilot, and so then from there, and then I left Holland. Kind of felt bad about my background, and because all my friends, kids can be hard on each other, right? Mm. So I became, all my friends from grade 7 went to college, university, and on, and I became a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but then I was kind of looked down on in a way. Mm. So I had to kind of prove to myself that I could do this, hence that. So I left when I was 23 with 1 suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and then when I was going to go to British Columbia, I came to Vancouver, went to the immigration department. Fortunately, there was a German fellow. I could speak some German. I could not speak English, and I told him what I wanted to do. He said, Prince George, go to Prince George. Because I told him I wanted to build a lumber mill, so that's where you have to go. Came off the bus here, we can still see right next to the UNBC building here, used to be the Greyhound station. Is the one that kind of, and I came off the bus, I had $25, I'll just say these, the $25.47. I counted it at least 3 times. So I had my suitcase, my 3 books, and 2 sets of clothes, no job, and started as a cleaner man, on and on and on. Now, the interesting part that you will ask me, I'm sure, is saying, but where are the 3 books? Well, that will give you a bit of an indication of what already had been going on in my mind. The one book was Management by Drucker in Dutch, and the other one was Logical Thinking. And then the book about Canada. I still have the books. And so...
I've got the Drucker book.
Yeah,
in English, not
in English. Yeah, so that kind. But what I had done then, when I became a furniture maker, already that if I heard people speaking on, in particular, business, politics, or anything, then I would go far and wide to listen to them, to understand the underlying dynamics around business. What made them successful? Why? What made them click? And then, in particular, on business magazines, I would be actively involved. Then I went into the Air Force. Then I came out of the Air Force and then worked for one, because my dad was associated with one of the larger importer of lumber in Western Europe. I spent time in Sweden and then worked for one of the biggest importers of lumber in Holland. Still there now today. So that laid the foundation for me. I had a fairly good idea about business. I was entrepreneurial already from the time that I was young, always thinking entrepreneurial. And then here, when I started on the location that we are today, I started with 3 employees and then $25,000 from the bank, and and then gradually build up the company.
Right.
So the point that I'm making is this one, is that 2 points actually. I have to put my books here. So
These are a different 3.
did you get my books at all?
No.
No, I'm going to give you a copy of
Okay.
each, and I'm going to sign them for you.
Thank you.
So I wrote this one, Against All Odds. It's an interesting book. Is that it's all about, not about how successful John is, not about that. It's the other one of all the ups and downs. Now, the other part that you may find interesting here is ADHD. I found, after I've been here for 32 years, I walked into a store on 3rd Avenue here, walked into the store, picked up a book, and the book's title was Driven to Distraction. I don't know why I picked it up, still don't know today. And I looked at the book, and it was about ADHD. And, and I said, oh my God, that's me. And so I took the book, I still had the book, I wrote in the book, actually in Dutch, because I was ashamed of it. It was looked at as a mental disorder, stigma for sure, in those days. And I wrote in it, now I finally know who I am. And, so that had an effect on my traditional learning ability, attention, and all the other things associated with it. And so
That explains grade 7, probably.
yeah,
Seriously.
and it does. There's no question about that. And then the other one is, then with ADHD, the frequency of occurrence, I thought after I read the book, I thought that the frequency, according to the book, was about 8% of the population. And the more I looked at it, I said, no, it's much higher than that, and the more I started talking about it and interacting about it, I believe that it was probably closer to 20%. Now, the interesting part about it is that the fellow that wrote the book, Dr. What was the doctor's name, Scott? Give it to me. Helliwell. Dr. Helliwell, that wrote the book, and wrote 18 other books, and 5 on the distraction. I had him on my podcast, 203, and well-known globally, actually. And so when I was interacting with him and saying that I believe that, telling the story, and he was familiar with that already, he's ADHD, actually, that I believe that the frequency of occurrence is probably around 20. He said, no, John, it's 25 or more. And then the other part that I found is that most entrepreneurs and CEOs, successful ones, is the operative, that I believe that 50% of them are ADHD. He said, no, John, probably 75%. And I agree with him. And so, and I felt I had to write a book about it, and so this is the book. But it's not only for the attention issues are not only for ADHD individuals, but also for people that have been affected by trauma, and then The frequency.
With trauma disorders, with PTSD or others, anxiety disorders, a lot of it's refocusing, right? You get caught up in your own head. I struggle with that.
Yeah.
And to get through a dissertation or something, when you have to constantly refocus.
Exactly.
Because you start thinking about all the things that could go wrong.
Yeah.
And so, you're looking for things to go wrong. You have to talk yourself down from that and refocus on what you need to do to get the job done, right?
Exactly. So the reason that I gave you the background is that during the war years, I was born in 1940. I remember from the time that I was 3.5 years old, hundreds of planes in the air bombing Germany, the Allied forces, and we were living in the northeastern part. And then the hunger went from 1944, 1945, when I had a brother and a sister. Every morning we would go with gunny bags into the railroad yards, picking up anything edible or burnable, and then seeing far too much that we should not have seen, and as a result PTSD obviously, and then the inner child, and then the combination of all of that, that people are affected by. But so.
But you're a case in point. People that are affected by things like this are not determined by things like that, right?
Right, exactly.
And I think one of the challenges that we have running organizations, whether it's a university or a lumber mill or anything else, is we have this broad spectrum of the population, and they're not all the same.
No.
And good leaders need to understand that people will come that are neurodivergent. They're not the typical 75%, they're in that 25% group that are distracted.
Right.
Or they're dealing with PTSD issues from childhood trauma or from a lot of other life experiences, which are distracting. We can better work with them in a healthier way.
Right.
And we can teach them through universities and through different programs. We can teach people how to work more effectively.
Yeah.
To get past that, whether it's residential school trauma within indigenous populations or whether it's abuse within a bad family setting in any population, there are things we can do to help overcome that. People can become successful like you've been.
Yeah, and for me, being vocal about it is to me very, very important because
it is, because if we don't normalize these things, then the stigma stays attached.
Now, what was interesting about this, and I just want to add that to it, it makes it kind of interesting in a way. So I was. We have a place in Victoria, so I usually go on the weekends. I go to Vancouver, and I have an office in Vancouver, so I'm in Vancouver, and then I fly to Vancouver. I call it my overseas flight, and so I'm sitting next to a fella, and he says to me, "I don't know if you remember me, but we talked last year," and I said, "I kind of do, yeah." So, and he said, "You were talking about a book. Is your book done?" I said, "Yeah, it's done actually, but I'm doing another one." And he said, "Well, what is it?" I said, "About ADHD." And his name was Tom Romer, who is the Dr. Tom Romer. Actually, he was the vice president and academic, British Columbia of Institute of Technology.
Okay.
So he was sitting next to me, and I told him I'm writing one about ADHD. And he said, "That's interesting because we are working on doing," that's why I mentioned this earlier, on a whole different concept of learning is micro-certification. And I said, so he started to talk about that it is rather than taking 4 years, bringing it down to the actual skill set that you want to develop, and then adding the other things later, but in particular the skill sets. And I said, that makes sense to me. And so then obviously it's a 12-minute flight in the air, so how much time you got to talk, right? So then he had to go, and then the following week again I was sitting in the flight with him, and he was sitting in 1A and I was sitting in 5, and I said, Tom, and all the people are looking. I said, wait for me at the gate, I need to talk to you. And so that's what I did, and then he waited for me by the gate and said, I need to talk to you about the book that I'm doing. I sent him a draft of the book. I need you to talk, because I did the book. I think it's well done, it's very popular. Is that I did all the things right from a perspective, my perspective as somebody with ADHD. But what I did not address, and that part I thought I'd missed, was missing still in the book. Okay, John, that was good. Where do we go now? That part was missing. So Dr. Tom Romer wrote a piece in this about that. I'm going to give you a copy of this too before you go.
Thanks.
And then the other book that I did here is, so many people
Looks
don't.
like this one's newer.
Yeah, this one is coming out in July, actually. I'm going to say, I showed you, I
Living
guess.
young, dying old.
Yeah, so the whole thing is about, age is just a number, right? So it's a quality of life that counts, and meaning diet, fitness, and all the others. So I'm writing this book, and the book is done now as we speak. We are working on it. It's going to the printers, I think, in a couple of weeks, and so it comes out. And
so I'm looking at the cover. Do you cover your bodybuilding competitions in this, or?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm part of it. The other part is, what do, as you well know, as we all know, we are much more sensitive about diet, health, fitness, awareness, all of that. But I approach this from a lay person's perspective. I'm not a doc. I can simply share with others what I do, and what obviously is working for me. That is important. And so that's what I do in the book. And then part of that is, I take fitness very serious, and I like to always have a goal of some sort. And in 2018, I qualified in Northern BC bodybuilding and fitness in physique, and that allowed me to go to the provincials. I came again third in bodybuilding, second in physique. They qualified me for the nationals in the Arnolds.
Oh, really?
And then COVID came, and so now I'm training again, and so I'm going to go back to the Arnolds in 2025 when I'm 85.
Best of luck.
And that's kind of what I look like, so.
That's the goal.
That's the goal. That's the objective. But the goal of the book is saying that you don't have to be an Olympian, or a goal is bodybuilding. I say the critical parts are diet and exercise, fitness, and at least so many people give up and say, no, I can't do that. And I say, walk 20 minutes a day, start 2 days a week, then slowly improve it. And as you do, then it will not take all that long. And all of a sudden people will say, oh, you look good. What are you doing? That sort of a thing. It becomes rewarding. And then being aware of diet, critically important. So what I do is, my wife is a vegetarian. If I go to a grocery store, I usually go in, I do all the shopping. I go in the inside, at the outside of the store, to the vegetables in particular, if they are organic. I don't like processed food, especially not super processed, because I don't know what is in it.
Lots of that.
So, and that's kind of what we do. It took my wife a long time to get me trained, though. So, so that's kind of what I do. So I kind of drifted away here a bit, but the part that I believe is important is that the schooling in particular here, for ADHD has been something that's close to me, because I've, the frequency of occurrence is so much higher than we first anticipated it. In addition to that, trauma, which is unique to First Nations in a lot of cases. And I believe that people that in a general sense should not only read my book, there are many other books, but the frequency of occurrence is so high that you cannot avoid interacting with them, either in your family or in your friends or in your workplace, is that to know about them, and they are somewhat different, but that's a good thing. And
diversity is a good thing.
Yeah, and so it makes them, different, and to get to know them and understand them. I still see so many people, virtually on a daily basis, that they say, I have a son, a daughter, or mature in an individual that I'm sure she has ADHD, and and it's a problem. Well, it isn't, so. And so therefore, how do you deal with it, and how do you go about it? So for me, it's something that I'm more vocal about it,
I think it's important. I think as leaders in the community, we have to take more of an advocacy role around issues like that. Because you can treat something like ADHD as a problem, and the historic way of doing that in elementary schools in Canada was Ritalin. You've got this kid that's overly active, is causing distractions in the classroom, so let's drug them until they can calm down, and then they're good students.
Yeah.
And they learn nothing, and they're not as productive later on.
Yeah.
But if you treat that as a different way of interacting and perceiving the world, well, how do you see the world? What can I learn from that? How can I use that in a group of people?
Exactly.
We can create new ideas, new ways of seeing things, new opportunities for everybody else. Well, now that thing that was a problem becomes an opportunity. But only if the teachers, the professors, the business leaders are saying, well, wait a minute, what's the potential value in this? How do we understand that better? How do we utilize people to their potential rather than trying to constrain everybody into some standard box that doesn't really fit anybody and
exactly
underutilizes the resources we have?
Exactly. And so that's why, in my case in particular, I'm vocal about it, because the frequency of occurrence is so high, but also as it relates to trauma, and saying, well, I can never do that because I had, if you want to be successful, you have to go to university, or you have to, no, you don't, so there's different ways of learning. I'm a good example of that, growing up during the Second World War under difficult circumstances, then, starting with nothing, virtually coming down here to the land of opportunity. It's, to me, attitude, passion, work ethic. Stay the course, don't give up, and all of those things.
But it sounds like you've also taken a learning approach to all of this.
I did.
And as a professional focused on learning all the time, I think it's critical.
Yeah.
I don't think everybody has to go to university or college, but I think everybody has to continuously learn.
The interesting point, Ron, though, is with my grade 3 and failing grade 3 and grade 3 times grade 7, I've had doctorates of laws from the University of Northern British Columbia. I'm just being tongue-in-cheek, but I'm proud of that.
I saw that you do have that, so
I'm proud of that. So that, and I remember I got that.
See, that's a recognition of lifelong learning.
Yeah, and that's what it is. So and that's.
So let's not underplay that. And within the MBA program. So again, we're celebrating 20 years, right? And I look at the spectrum of students we have. And I think some of our most impressive students are the ones that come to us with very significant work experience and on-the-job learning and no university degree.
Correct.
And they get into the MBA program and they work harder and they learn more than most of the other students in the program. And they come out the other side and you go, wait a minute, did this guy go to Harvard for his undergrad or something? It's like,
exactly.
No, he was a shop steward or something at a pulp mill.
Yeah.
And he wanted more.
Exactly.
And he was always asking questions. Well, why does this work this way? What if we did this? What happens if we take this team and we do that?
Exactly.
And he's gone as far as he can go, or she's gone as far as she can go with asking people to work. It's like, but I don't know enough yet.
Yeah.
I wonder if I could do the MBA. And we say yes, and they come in and they do great.
Exactly. And that's the point, right?
And we let them in because we recognize they have learned things they need to know to succeed in a graduate level program. It's not that there's a formal threshold that you have to do just because we've said there's a formal threshold. It's, are you prepared to learn what you need to do to succeed in this program?
And how can we help you to, if you're not prepared, then what can we do to stimulate you and say, you can do it?
Right. In other cases, we could take somebody with a degree and say, you know what, you're not ready for this yet.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got a degree, but you're not ready for this type of learning yet.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's meeting people where they are and not where you think they should be and saying, how do we help bring you along if you're ready for this yet?
Exactly. So if I look back, one of the things that was in 1997, 32 years after when I picked up that book. Now in 1990 already, I was already successful, and everybody said, "Oh, you're so successful," and blah blah blah. I didn't feel that way, you know. So because I was still struggling with that inner saying, well, you know, that I'm still in the process of proving to myself that I could do it. And then communications was not the thing that came easy to me. I could interact in my own group setting at in my company, but as soon as I got outside of that, it didn't work. And to self-confidence or all those things.
So how did you change that?
Yeah. So then what happened is that my ex-sister-in-law dragged me to a place called Toastmasters. And I said, "What are they doing there?" So she said, "You will like it." I said, "Well, are they going to ask me anything?" He said, "No, you just sit there and watch." And I said, "Okay." So I went down there, and then halfway through the meeting, he said, "Hey, John, why don't you tell us about it?" I said, "Oh my God, I'll never go back here." I stayed there for 10 years, and I became a distinguished Toastmaster, which is the highest level in Toastmasters. And, probably 450,000 people are in Toastmasters in some form, the United States, Canada, and Europe, and other places. And probably 10 million people have benefited from Toastmasters in some form or fashion. Probably less than 1% go to the level of distinguished Toastmaster. But to me, it became so critical that it changed my life. So if I look back between 1990 to 2000, I was Toastmastering, to the highest level. And then 1997, I discovered ADHD. I'm ADHD, and then now it took me 5 years before I went to my doc. That was a friend of mine, and had delivered our 2 daughters. In 1997, I found a book. In 1962, I went to his office, and he said, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." And he said, "Look at it," and yeah, I do. And so from that point forward, so if you really look at it, Ron, then I can look back and say, for virtually 50 years, from the time I was 13 to the time I was 19, I was already 62, 50 years, I didn't understand who I was, really, but still had the elements of becoming successful. And that's when I started writing books. Against all odds, I wrote about 5-6 years ago. And it took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. I'm a good writer. And so then the next one was this one, the next one, that one. Now I'm writing that one, and then I'm working on 2 other ones. The one is about communications, which I believe is very important. And the other one is about the forest industry, and the history of the forest industry. So, but the point that I'm making is that it changed everything for me, understanding, and from there on in, already having all that other knowledge built up that allowed me to build a very sizable company. We have 3 silos. The one is lumber, the other one is warehousing, and the other one is real estate. Quite successful. And the point that I'm making is that all learning is not structured necessarily, but the tools are available to somebody that wants to be, become knowledgeable, and that benefited me.
Right.
So.
That's pretty cool.
What else comes to mind, Ron? Well, we covered a lot of ground here.
We did. Well, if we're putting a plug in for PG, this is a good place to live the dream.
Yes, no question about it.
I mean, I realize it's raining, so anybody's watching can see
Rain
the
is
gray
good.
and the black in the background. But this is good for the fire season around here, as
Yeah.
we're all aware right now.
Yeah,
My office up on the hill, I look out and I see the peaks of the Rocky Mountains.
yeah. Amazing, eh?
It's incredible, right?
Yeah,
Lately today, we're at the convergence of people meet here because two rivers are converging.
yeah.
and the
Not exactly in
resources
the
that are
face.
available, and
Yeah,
the opportunities that presents, and the implications of this is a meeting ground for people.
yeah,
Simon Yu, the mayor, keeps talking about how he wants to make this a global hub of people flying in and out of North America and Asia,
right.
which in some ways sounds really pie in the sky. But if you're going to dream, let's dream big. And
Exactly.
why shouldn't it be this place? Again, I look at the
Exactly.
university, it's the United Nations.
Exactly.
But the opportunities to grow, the opportunities to develop, the passion of the people around here,
Yeah.
I think the best is to come.
But I find a lot of times, Ron, I fly a lot because we're doing a lot of business in the United States in my companies, and then I'm a pilot, but flying commercial now I'm speaking about. I usually sit by the window, and if I fly through North America, Canada, and the United States, and I look outside and say it's paradise. How could we ever have it better than we have it here? And then in my case, like looking around the world, the Ukraine and all the things that are going on there, the Middle East, and I was born under a dictatorship out of Hitler, who affected our family and many others, including myself. We live in a democratic country. I look at the United States in particular. Obviously my heart's very close to the United States because we do a lot of business, know a lot of people there. And then the United States has been the example of democratic countries, laid the foundation 250 years ago with the Constitution, starting with "We the People," and still is an example today. Although it troubles me somewhat looking at their leadership, and I usually don't get involved in politics, but again, the United States is still the leader of the free world as we know it. And I say to people in a general sense, that elections are very, very important. Democratic rule is very, very important. United States is, interesting to say the least. And then Canada, I say, is boring. But I love it. It's the land of opportunity, and that in all the years that I've been here, it's leaving Holland when I was 23, 60 years. It's paradise, and I love it.
This is a beautiful place.
Ron,
It's a pleasure to meet you.
pleasure. Thank you.
Perfect. That's a wrap. 1 hour, 8 minutes.
How do we do